The first warning came as a low rumble through the metal floors of Research Station Kepler-7. Dr. Sarah Chen looked up from her lab work, watching the liquid in her test tubes ripple like tiny earthquakes. The station's AI voice crackled through the speakers, calm but urgent. "All personnel, this is not a drill. Hostile ships detected approaching our position. Evacuation protocols are now in effect." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd been expecting this day for months, ever since the hegemony discovered humans had been secretly studying their young. What they didn't understand was that Sarah wasn't just any researcher. She was a xenobiologist who had spent 3 years earning the trust of captured hegemony offspring. The station shook again, harder this time. Through the reinforced windows, Sarah could see the dark shapes of hegemony warships blocking out the stars. Their weapons were already charging, painting the station's hull with targeting lasers. "Sarah," Commander Martinez's voice boomed over the intercom. "Get to the evacuation pods now." But Sarah couldn't leave, not yet. She ran down the corridor toward the secure wing where they kept the young hegemony prisoners. These weren't just enemy aliens to her anymore. She had watched them grow, learned their names, seen them cry when they had nightmares. They were children, and she'd be damned if she'd abandoned them to burn. The secure wing was in chaos. Security guards were running past her, heading for the escape pods. Emergency lights painted everything red. Sarah pressed her palm against the scanner outside the containment area. The heavy doors slid open with a mechanical hiss. Inside, 5 young hegemony huddled together in the corner of their cell. They looked like a cross between wolves and dragons, with silver fur that sparkled under the lights and intelligent golden eyes. The oldest was barely 10 years old in human terms. The youngest couldn't be more than 5. Kesnira, Tormel, Jax, Sarah called their names softly as she approached. They looked up at her with those massive eyes full of fear and confusion. Kes, the oldest female, stepped forward. She had learned enough human words to communicate. "Fire danger?" she asked in her broken English. "Yes, fire danger," Sarah replied using the simple words they understood. "We have to go now." The station groaned around them as another blast hit. Sarah could smell smoke in the air. She quickly entered the unlock code for their cell. The force field shimmered and disappeared. "Come, little ones," Sarah said, opening her arms. "Trust me." For a moment, they hesitated. These were the same creatures whose parents were trying to destroy the station. Their people had been at war with humans for 5 years, but Sarah had fed them, sung to them, comforted them when they were sick. Trust had grown slowly between them. Kes made a decision for all of them. She rushed forward and grabbed Sarah's hand with her small clawed fingers. The others followed, pressing close to Sarah like she was their pack leader. "Good, that's good," Sarah whispered. "Stay close to me." She led them out of the containment area and into the main corridor. The station was falling apart around them. Ceiling panels crashed down, sparks flew from damaged electrical systems, and the artificial gravity flickered on and off. Sarah gathered the 5 young hegemony close to her chest, shielding them with her body as debris fell. "Sarah!" Commander Martinez appeared at the end of the hallway, his face streaked with soot. "What are you doing?" "The evacuation pods are this way." "I won't leave them," Sarah shouted back over the noise of the dying station. Martinez stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "Those are enemy combatants. They're children." Sarah held the 5 cubs tighter. Little Jax, the youngest, was trembling against her shoulder. "I won't abandon children to die." Another massive explosion rocked the station. Through a crack in the hull, Sarah could see space and stars. They were running out of time. "The pods are almost full," Martinez warned. "If we don't leave in the next 2 minutes, we're all dead." Sarah looked down at the 5 young faces looking up at her with complete trust. Kes had wrapped her small arms around Sarah's neck. Tor and Mel clung to her lab coat. Nira and Jax pressed against her sides. They were depending on her completely. "Then we better run fast," Sarah said. She scooped up Jax and Nira, the 2 smallest ones, and started running toward the evacuation bay. Kes, Tor, and Mel ran alongside her, their clawed feet clicking on the metal floor. Commander Martinez swore under his breath but followed them. The evacuation bay was a nightmare of smoke and flashing lights. Most of the pods had already launched. Only 2 remained, and dozens of people were fighting to get into them. Sarah pushed through the crowd, protecting the young hegemony with her body. "Make room," Commander Martinez shouted. "Researcher and subjects coming through." "Subjects?" a security officer yelled back. "Those are the enemy. Leave them here." Sarah felt rage flash through her like lightning. Try to stop me, she growled, and something in her voice made the security officer step back. She reached the last available pod. It was built for 6 people, and there were already 4 inside. With Sarah and the 5 cubs, they'd be packed tight. But it would work. Everyone in, Sarah ordered, lifting the young hegemony into the pod one by one. As she climbed in last, Sarah looked back at the research station that had been her home for 3 years. Through the windows, she could see hegemony soldiers in battle armor moving through the corridors, searching for survivors. They would find the containment area empty and wonder what happened to their young. The pod launched just as the station's reactor went critical. Through the small porthole, Sarah watched Kepler-7 explode in a brilliant flash of light. She held the 5 young hegemony close as they tumbled through space toward the human fleet. Kes looked up at her with those golden eyes and spoke in careful English. "You save us, why?" Sarah smiled and stroked the young female's silver fur. "Because that's what humans do," she said simply. "We protect those who can't protect themselves." She had no idea that this moment would change the course of the war. She only knew that she had 5 lives to protect, and she would die before she let any harm come to them. The rescue ship Defiance found their escape pod drifting in the debris field 6 hours later. Sarah had kept the 5 young hegemony calm during the long wait, sharing her emergency rations and telling them stories about Earth. When the rescue crew opened the pod door, they stopped dead in their tracks. "What the hell?" Sergeant Williams stared at the cluster of silver-furred aliens pressed against Sarah's chest. "Ma'am, are those hegemony young?" "Their names are Kes, Nira, Tor, Mel, and Jax," Sarah said firmly. "They're under my protection." The rescue team looked confused. During 5 years of brutal war, no human had ever seen young hegemony. The aliens kept their offspring hidden away on their homeworlds. These 5 were probably the first hegemony children any human military personnel had encountered. "Orders are to bring all survivors to the Defiance," Williams said carefully. "But ma'am, I have to ask, are they dangerous?" Sarah almost laughed. Jax, the youngest, was currently sucking his thumb and leaning against her shoulder. Mel had fallen asleep in her lap. "Does this look dangerous to you, Sergeant?" The trip to the Defiance was tense. Other survivors kept staring at Sarah and the cubs. She heard whispered conversations, angry voices saying she should have left the enemy behind. Dr. Peterson, the head of xenobiology, confronted her directly. "You've compromised this entire rescue operation," he hissed. "When the hegemony finds out we have their young, they'll hunt us to the ends of the galaxy." "Let them try," Sarah replied calmly. "I won't hurt children, no matter what species they are." Aboard the Defiance, Captain Morrison called Sarah to his ready room. The 5 cubs followed her everywhere now, treating her like their pack mother. They sat in a neat row behind her chair while she faced the captain's stern gaze. "Dr. Chen, I need to understand what you're thinking," Morrison said. "These aliens' parents are trying to wipe humanity from existence. Their fleet commanders have ordered the destruction of every human colony." "And you want us to protect their children?" Sarah looked back at the 5 young faces watching the conversation with curious eyes. Kes was quietly translating the big words for the others in their own language, a series of soft growls and musical chirps. "Captain, I've studied these species for 3 years. Yes, the adult hegemony are our enemies, but these 5 have never hurt anyone. They've been prisoners since they were babies. They don't even remember their homeworld." "That doesn't change what they are," Morrison argued. "It changes everything," Sarah shot back. "Sir, we're supposed to be the good guys in this war. We say we're fighting for freedom, for the right of all species to exist peacefully. How can we claim that moral authority if we murder children?" Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Through his office windows, Sarah could see the hegemony fleet in the distance, still searching through the debris of Kepler-7. They were looking for their young. "The Security Council wants them transferred to a military facility for interrogation," Morrison finally said. "Absolutely not." Sarah's voice went cold. "I won't let anyone hurt them." "Dr. Chen, you're not in a position to make demands." Sarah stood up slowly. Behind her, the 5 cubs sensed the tension and moved closer together. Kes put a protective arm around little Jax. "Captain, these children trust me completely. If you try to separate us, they'll be terrified. They might even die from stress. Is that really the example humanity wants to set?" Before Morrison could answer, alarms started blaring throughout the ship. The captain's communication console lit up with urgent messages. "Sir?" The bridge officer's voice crackled through the speaker. Hegemony fleet is moving toward our position. They're broadcasting on all channels. Morrison activated the main screen. The image of a massive hegemony warrior appeared, his golden fur marked with battle scars and his eyes burning with rage. When he spoke, his voice was like controlled thunder. Human vessel, I am Fleet Commander Vex of the Hegemony War Council. You have something that belongs to us. Return our young immediately and we will grant you a quick death. Refuse and we will tear your ship apart piece by piece. Sarah felt the 5 cubs press closer to her legs. They recognized the voice. Kess whimpered softly and spoke in her own language. Sarah didn't need a translation to understand the fear in her voice. That's their father. Sarah whispered to Morrison. Kess just said that's their father. Morrison stared at the screen. Father? You mean, these aren't random hegemony children, Captain. They're the offspring of their supreme military commander. No wonder they've been hunting for them. The implications hit Morrison like a freight train. The 5 cubs clinging to Sarah weren't just any prisoners of war. They were the children of the most powerful hegemony leader. Their capture or death could change the entire course of the conflict. Commander Vex spoke again. I know you can hear me, humans. I'm giving you one chance. My children were taken from their colony ship 3 years ago. Intelligence reports say they were held on your research station. If they have been harmed in any way, I will personally ensure that every human world burns. Sarah knelt down to the cub's level. Do you understand what's happening? She asked Kess softly. The young female nodded gravely. Father is very angry. He thinks humans hurt us. What do you want to tell him? Kess looked at her 4 siblings, then back at Sarah. We want to tell him that you saved us, that you are a good mother to us. Sarah's heart clenched. She looked up at Captain Morrison. Sir, I have an idea, but you're not going to like it, Morrison sighed. At this point, Dr. Chen, I'm open to anything that doesn't end with us all dead. Let me talk to Commander Vex. Let him see his children are safe. That's insane. You'd be putting yourself and those cubs in incredible danger. Captain, look at this from a parent's perspective. Commander Vex has been searching for his children for 3 years. He's been told they were captured by an enemy that his people consider monsters. Right now he's probably imagining the worst possible scenarios. Sarah stood up, gathering the 5 cubs around her. But what if he sees that a human risked her life to save them? What if he realizes that we're not the monsters he thinks we are? Morrison studied her face. Outside, the hegemony fleet was moving closer, weapons charging for what would certainly be a devastating attack. The Defiance was outnumbered 50-1. You really think this could work? Morrison asked. Sarah looked down at Kess, who was holding Jax's hand and watching the adults with those wise golden eyes. I think it's the only chance any of us have. The captain made his decision. Open a channel to the hegemony fleet. Dr. Chen, you have 5 minutes to convince the most dangerous alien warrior in the galaxy that humanity deserves to live. The bridge of the Defiance fell silent as the communication channel opened. On the main screen, Commander Vex's scarred face filled the display, his golden eyes blazing with fury and desperation. Sarah stood in front of the screen with the 5 cubs gathered around her legs, their small hands gripping her lab coat. Commander Vex, Sarah began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen. I want you to see that your children are safe. Vex's expression changed instantly when he saw the 5 small figures pressed against Sarah. His fierce mask crumbled, replaced by raw emotion that transcended species. He leaned forward, his massive hands pressed against his command console. Kess, Nira, my cubs, are you hurt? His voice broke as he spoke in his own language, a series of gentle growls and purrs that sounded nothing like his earlier threats. Kess stepped forward bravely, still holding on to Sarah's hand. Father, we are not hurt. The good mother protected us from the fire danger. Good mother? Vex's gaze shifted to Sarah, confusion mixing with suspicion. Sarah felt 4 years of xenobiology training kick in. She had studied hegemony family structures, their pack dynamics, their social bonds. She knew that to them, protecting young was the highest honor regardless of blood relationship. Commander, when the station was attacked, I couldn't leave them behind. They're children. I don't care what species they are, I won't abandon children to die. Tor, the second oldest male, spoke up in his halting English. Father, she gave us food when hungry, sang songs when scared, made medicine when Jax was sick. Vex stared at Sarah with new intensity. You cared for them? For 3 years? Every day, Sarah replied simply. I taught them human words, they taught me yours. Kes helped me understand hegemony nutrition. Mel showed me your constellation patterns. They're remarkable children, Commander. You should be proud of them. The hegemony leader was quiet for a long moment, studying his offspring through the screen. They looked healthy, well-fed, unafraid. Jax, the youngest, even waved at his father with a shy smile. This is not what I expected, Vex admitted. Our intelligence suggested they were being tortured, experimented upon. Captain Morrison stepped forward. Commander, Dr. Chen volunteered to care for your children. She studied their needs, their culture, their development. She's published papers defending their intelligence and emotional complexity. Sarah reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small device. Commander, would you like to see something? She activated a holographic display showing dozens of videos recorded over 3 years. Images of the cubs playing together, learning to read human text. Sarah teaching them about Earth animals while they taught her about hegemony traditions. In one video, little Mel was comforting Nira after a nightmare, just as Sarah had taught them humans comfort each other. Vex watched in stunned silence. These weren't videos of prisoners in a laboratory. They showed a family that had formed across species lines, built on care and understanding rather than fear and dominance. You taught them our lullabies, Vex whispered, hearing Sarah hum a traditional hegemony melody in one video. Kes taught me. She said it helped them sleep when they missed home. The mighty commander's composure finally cracked. Sarah could see tears forming in his golden eyes as he watched his youngest daughter, Nira, teaching Sarah to weave hegemony-style friendship bracelets. For 3 years, I have dreamed of revenge, Vex said quietly. I have planned the destruction of every human world, imagining the pain my cubs must be enduring. I have become a monster in my quest to save them. You became a father looking for his children, Sarah corrected gently. Any human parent would have done the same thing. Kes spoke up again, her voice clear and strong. Father, the good mother says humans protect cubs that are not their own. She says this is what makes them pack strong. Sarah knelt down to the cubs' level, gathering them close. I want you all to know something important. Your father loves you very much. Everything he's done, even fighting this war, has been to try to get you back home safely. She looked up at the screen, meeting Vex's eyes directly. Commander, I need you to understand something too. These 5 have been my family for 3 years. The thought of them being hurt breaks my heart. If you want to take revenge on humanity, start with me. But please don't punish innocent people for choices they never made. Vex was quiet for several minutes, his bridge crew waiting tensely behind him. Finally he spoke. Dr. Chen, you have done something I thought impossible. You have shown me that honor exists among humans. He turned to address Captain Morrison. Human Captain, I am prepared to discuss terms. What kind of terms? Morrison asked carefully. My cubs will return to hegemony space where they belong. But they will not return as former prisoners. They will return with their pack mother if she chooses to come. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. You're offering me safe passage to hegemony space? I am offering you a place in my family, Vex said solemnly. You have earned the right to be called pack mother to my cubs. Among my people, this is the highest honor we can bestow. The bridge erupted in whispered conversations, a human scientist being invited to live among the hegemony. It was unprecedented. It could change everything about the war. Sarah looked down at the 5 cubs surrounding her. They were all looking up at her with hope and love in their golden eyes. These weren't her biological children, but they had become her family in every way that mattered. There's just one problem, Sarah said slowly. If I go with you, how do we stop this war? How do we prevent more families from being torn apart like yours was? Vex considered this carefully. What do you propose? Sarah took a deep breath. She was about to suggest something that could either end the war or get everyone killed. Let me be an ambassador. Let me bring human representatives to hegemony space, and bring hegemony representatives to human worlds. Let both our species see what I've learned over 3 years. And what have you learned, Pack Mother? Sarah smiled, stroking Kessa's silver fur as she spoke. That we're not so different after all. We both love our children. We both fight to protect our families. We both dream of peace and safety for those we care about. She stood up, still surrounded by the 5 cubs. Commander Vex, I've seen your children grow up. They're curious about everything, kind to each other, brave when they need to be, and gentle when they can afford to be. They're just like human children in all the ways that matter. Vex nodded slowly. I have seen the same thing in your care for them, Dr. Chen. Perhaps Perhaps it is time for both our species to remember that strength comes not from conquest, but from protecting those who need protection. The hegemony fleet began to power down its weapons. For the first time in 5 years, human and hegemony ships faced each other, without preparing for battle. Pack Mother. Kes tugged on Sarah's coat. Does this mean the fire danger is over? Sarah looked at the young female who had become like a daughter to her, then up at the screen where Commander Vex waited for her answer. I think it means the fire danger is just beginning to end, she said softly, but for the first time I have hope. 3 months later, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the hegemony flagship Starfire, watching the blue marble of Earth grow larger through the massive windows. The 5 cubs pressed against the glass beside her, their golden eyes wide with wonder. So many lights, whispered Mel, pointing at the city clusters scattered across the night side of the planet. Is that where all the humans live? Most of them, Sarah confirmed, placing a gentle hand on the young male's shoulder. Your father is about to become the first hegemony commander to visit Earth in peace. The journey to this moment had been more difficult than anyone anticipated. When Sarah first arrived in hegemony space with Commander Vex and his cubs, the reaction from both species had been explosive. Human politicians called her a traitor. Hegemony generals accused Vex of being weak and manipulated by human trickery. But the cubs had been her secret weapon. Everywhere they went in hegemony space, other families saw how healthy and happy they were. They saw Kes speaking fluent human English, Tor explaining human mathematical concepts, Nira teaching other cubs human songs. The evidence was impossible to ignore. Humans had not tortured or brainwashed these children. They had raised them with love. Sarah had spent those 3 months learning more about hegemony society than any human before her. She discovered they were not the savage conquerors human propaganda portrayed. They were a proud people who valued family above all else, whose war against humanity had begun as revenge for attacks on their colony ships. Pack Mother. Jax tugged on her sleeve. Will Earth humans accept us? Sarah knelt down to the youngest cub's level. At barely 8 years old in human terms, Jax had spent half his life thinking of Sarah as his mother. The thought of meeting strangers who might fear or hate him was terrifying. Some will, Sarah said honestly. Some won't, but you know what I've learned. Most humans are like most hegemony. They want to protect their families and live in peace. Once they see that you're just children who want the same things human children want, they'll understand. Commander Vex approached them, his heavy footsteps echoing in the observation deck. Over the past months, Sarah had learned to read his expressions. Right now he looked nervous, which was unusual for the mighty warrior. Second thoughts? Sarah asked gently. Many, Vex admitted. My military advisors believe this is madness. They think your Earth leaders will capture me the moment I step onto your world. And what do you think? Vex looked down at his 5 cubs who had gathered around Sarah like she truly was their pack mother. I think that any species that could produce someone like you cannot be entirely evil. The communication console chimed with an incoming message from Earth. Captain Morrison's face appeared on the screen, broadcasting from the space station that would serve as the neutral meeting ground. Commander Vex, Dr. Chen, welcome to Earth space. I have to tell you, there are a lot of nervous people down here. The Secretary General has agreed to the meeting, but security is extensive. Understood, Vex replied formally. I come with 5 cubs and 1 human pack mother. We seek no conflict, sir. Morrison hesitated. There have been some developments since you left human space. Hardline factions on both sides are calling this meeting a betrayal. There are protests in every major city on Earth, and I'm getting reports of hegemony fleets mobilizing on the border. Sarah felt her stomach drop. What kind of protests? Mixed. About half are calling for peace, saying the war has gone on long enough. The other half? Morrison grimaced. The other half want Commander Vex arrested for war crimes the moment he arrives. Kes moved closer to Sarah, her small hand finding the human's fingers. Are we in danger, Pack Mother? I won't let anything happen to you, Sarah promised, though she wasn't sure how she could keep that promise if things went wrong. The next few hours were tense as they transferred to the space station. Human security forces lined the docking bay, their weapons lowered but ready. Sarah could see the fear in their faces as Commander Vex ducked through the airlock, his massive frame making even the large human soldiers look small. But it was the cubs who broke the tension. As soon as they saw the humans, they clustered around Sarah, and their obvious trust in her spoke louder than any words. These weren't dangerous aliens. They were scared children holding on to their human mother figure. Secretary General Williams met them in the station's main conference room. She was a stern woman in her 60s, but Sarah saw her expression soften when little Jax peeked out from behind Sarah's legs and waved shyly. "Commander Vex," Williams said formally, "you understand that many people consider you a war criminal." "I understand," Vex replied. "Just as many of my people consider you genocidal monsters. Perhaps we are both wrong." Williams gestured to the conference table. "Dr. Chen has provided us with extensive documentation about your children's care and development. She's also submitted a proposal for establishing permanent diplomatic relations between our species." "The Pack Mother speaks wisdom," Vex said, taking a seat that had been specially constructed to support his weight. "But wisdom is not always welcome in times of war." As if to prove his point, alarms suddenly began blaring throughout the station. A communications officer burst into the room. "Madam Secretary, we have a problem. Hardline hegemony forces have broken away from the main fleet. They're demanding Commander Vex return immediately or face charges of treason." At the same time, another officer reported, "Ma'am, militant human groups have launched ships from 3 different planets. They're calling Commander Vex's presence on the station an invasion that requires immediate response." Sarah looked around the room at the chaos erupting. Months of careful diplomatic work were about to be destroyed by extremists on both sides who preferred war to the difficult work of peace. But then Kess stepped forward, her young voice cutting through the adult panic. "May I speak?" she asked politely. Everyone in the room turned to look at the small hegemony female. She was barely tall enough to see over the conference table, but she stood with the dignity of someone much older. "I am Kess, daughter of Commander Vex, Pack daughter of Dr. Sarah Chen. I have lived with humans for 3 years. I have also lived with hegemony for 8 years. I want to tell you what I have learned." Secretary General Williams sat down slowly. "Please go ahead." Kess climbed onto a chair so everyone could see her. Her 4 siblings moved to stand behind her in support. Both humans and hegemony love their cubs very much. Both protect their families. Both are afraid of things they do not understand. But fear makes bad choices. She pointed to the alarm lights flashing around the room. Right now, scared people are making bad choices. They choose fighting instead of talking. They choose hate instead of hope. The young female looked directly at Secretary General Williams, then at her father. "Pack Mother Sarah taught me that bravery is not about fighting. Bravery is about doing what is right even when you are afraid. Father, you were brave to come here. Human Leader Williams, you were brave to let us come." Jax, the youngest, stepped forward to stand beside his sister. "I want to grow up in a galaxy where hegemony cubs and human cubs can be friends. Like we are friends with Pack Mother Sarah." The room fell silent except for the sound of alarms. Outside, 2 fleets of extremists were racing toward each other, ready to restart the war that had claimed millions of lives. Sarah stood up slowly, placing her hands on Kess and Jax's shoulders. "Secretary General, Commander, these children have lived the peace we're all trying to build. They've shown us it's possible." She looked around the room at the assembled diplomats and military officers. "The question is, are we going to let fear drive our decisions, or are we going to be as brave as these 5 cubs who just asked us to choose hope over hate?" Commander Vex rose from his chair, his golden eyes reflecting both pride and determination. "My daughter speaks truth. I propose we show both our species what real strength looks like. What do you have in mind?" Williams asked. Vex smiled, an expression that transformed his scarred face. "We go to Earth, all of us, together, and we let both species see that their greatest warriors can choose peace." Outside, the extremist fleets grew closer, their weapons charging for a battle that could destroy everything. But inside the conference room, 2 former enemies began planning something that had never happened before in galactic history. A joint demonstration that would prove peace was stronger than war. The landing on Earth was unlike anything in recorded history. Sarah stood in the doorway of the diplomatic transport, watching millions of humans gather in the streets of Geneva. Some held signs calling for peace, others demanded blood. But all of them fell silent when Commander Vex emerged from the ship, his 5 cubs walking confidently beside him. "Pack Mother," Nira whispered. "There are so many humans. More than all the stars." "They're all here to see you," Sarah whispered back. "Remember what we practiced. Show them who you really are. The cubs had spent the entire journey preparing for this moment. They had learned human greetings, practiced speaking clearly in English, and even prepared a presentation about hegemony culture that they wanted to share with Earth children. President Chen of the Earth Federation waited at the bottom of the ramp. Sarah noticed the heavy security presence, but she also saw something else. Children. Human children had been brought to the landing site, kept safely behind barriers but close enough to see everything. Commander Vex, President Chen said formally, "On behalf of Earth and all human colonies, I welcome you to our homeworld." Vex inclined his massive head respectfully. "President Chen, I come not as a conqueror, but as a father hoping to build a future where all cubs can live without fear." Little Jack suddenly broke away from the group and ran toward the human children behind the barriers. Sarah's heart stopped for a moment, but then she saw what he was doing. A human girl about his age had dropped her toy, and Jax was picking it up for her. "Here," he said in his careful English, offering the toy through the barrier. "You dropped this." The human girl stared at him for a moment, then smiled and took the toy. "Thank you. What's your name?" "I am Jax. What is your name?" "Emma, are you really an alien?" Jax giggled, a sound that was somehow both human and hegemony. "Yes, are you really a human?" "Yes, do you want to be friends?" Security guards moved to intervene, but President Chen held up a hand to stop them. The entire crowd was watching as Jax and Emma talked through the barrier, their innocent conversation carrying clearly in the sudden quiet. "Pack Mother says humans and hegemony can be friends," Jax explained. "She says we are not so different." "My mom says aliens are scary," Emma replied honestly. "But you don't look scary. You look like a puppy with hands." Jax laughed again, and the sound made something shift in the crowd. These weren't the monstrous invaders of human propaganda. This was a child making a friend. Commander Vex stepped forward. "President Chen, my cubs have prepared something for your people. May they present it?" "Of course." Kess moved to the front of the group, her siblings arranged behind her. In clear, confident English, she began to speak. "Humans of Earth. I am Kess, daughter of Commander Vex, pack daughter of Dr. Sarah Chen. My brothers and sisters and I want to share our story with you." She gestured to Tor, who stepped forward holding a small device. A holographic display appeared above them, showing images of hegemony worlds, crystalline cities built into mountainsides, vast forests where silver-furred families lived in harmony, starships designed for exploration rather than war. "This is our home," Mel explained. "Before the war, we were explorers. We traveled among the stars, learning about new worlds and new forms of life." Nira took over the narration. "When humans first met hegemony, both sides made mistakes. We were afraid of each other because we looked different and spoke different languages. The hologram shifted to show early contact scenarios, both peaceful meetings and tragic misunderstandings that had escalated into violence. Fear made us enemies," Tor continued. "But Pack Mother Sarah taught us that understanding makes us friends." Jax, the youngest, pointed to Sarah. "She could have left us to die when the station was burning. But she saved us because she said humans protect cubs, even cubs that are not their own." The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word from these articulate, thoughtful children who were supposed to be monsters. Kess stepped forward again. "We want to show you something else. Something Pack Mother taught us about human culture." The 5 cubs began to sing. It was a human lullaby that Sarah had taught them years ago, but they sang it in perfect harmony, their voices blending human melody with hegemony musical traditions. The result was hauntingly beautiful, a song that belonged to both species and neither. When they finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. Even the hardline protesters had lowered their signs, caught up in the simple beauty of the moment. President Chen wiped her eyes. "That was extraordinary. Commander Vex, your children are remarkable." "They are remarkable because they have been raised with love by both species," Vex replied. "Dr. Chen has shown them the best of humanity, just as my people have taught them hegemony values of honor and family." Suddenly, communication devices throughout the crowd began buzzing with urgent alerts. Sarah felt her stomach drop as she saw the news reports flooding in. "What is it?" Commander Vex asked. President Chen's face had gone pale. "The extremist fleets we detected earlier. They've engaged each other in the outer system. Both sides are claiming the other fired first." The crowd began to murmur with worry and fear. All their careful diplomacy could be destroyed in minutes if the extremists succeeded in restarting the war. But then Emma, the human girl who had been talking to Jax, called out from behind the barrier. "Why are they fighting?" "Jax said we could be friends." Her clear child's voice carried across the landing site. Other children began asking similar questions. Why were adults fighting when children could be friends so easily? Kes stepped up to the microphone that had been set up for the ceremony. "May I speak to the fighting ships?" President Chen looked uncertain. "I don't think that's possible." "Actually," Commander Vex said slowly, "both fleets will be monitoring this broadcast. If she speaks here, they will hear her." Sarah nodded encouragingly at Kes. The young female took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice carrying the authority of someone far beyond her years. "This is Kes, daughter of Commander Vex of the Hegemony War Council. I am speaking to all ships in Earth space, both human and Hegemony. Throughout the solar system, combat operations paused as soldiers and warriors heard the voice of a child cutting through the chaos of war. I know you are angry. I know you are afraid. For 5 years you have fought because you believed the other side was evil. But I have lived with both humans and Hegemony. I have learned that both sides love their families. Both sides want peace. Both sides have been hurt by this war." The crowd around the landing site had grown completely still. Parents held their children closer as they listened to this young voice calling for sanity in the darkness. "You have a choice right now," Kes continued. "You can choose to keep fighting and more cubs will lose their parents. More parents will lose their cubs. Or you can choose to be brave enough to stop fighting and start talking." She paused, her golden eyes reflecting the afternoon sun. "My pack mother Sarah taught me that the strongest thing anyone can do is protect those who cannot protect themselves. Right now there are cubs on both sides who need protection from this war. Please, protect us by choosing peace." The transmission ended, and for several long minutes the entire landing site was silent. Then slowly reports began coming in from the outer system. Ships were powering down weapons. Extremist commanders were being overruled by their own crews. The battle that could have restarted the war was ending before it truly began. Commander Vex placed a massive hand gently on his daughter's shoulder. "You have done something I could not do with all my warships and weapons. You have reminded both our species what we are truly fighting for." President Chen stepped forward, her voice thick with emotion. "Commander Vex, on behalf of Earth and all human worlds, I formally invite the Hegemony to establish permanent diplomatic relations. We have a lot to learn from each other." As the crowd erupted in cheers, Sarah gathered the 5 cubs around her. They had done something unprecedented in galactic history. They had ended a war not with weapons or threats, but with truth and compassion. "Are we really going to have peace now?" Jax asked, his young face bright with hope. Sarah looked at the crowds of humans and the few Hegemony delegates who had arrived with Vex's fleet, all of them beginning to mingle and talk. It would take time, patience, and a lot of hard work. But for the first time in 5 years, real peace seemed possible. "I think we're going to try," she said softly. "And sometimes trying is the most important thing of all." 2 years after the historic landing on Earth, Sarah stood in the newly constructed Human Hegemony Cultural Exchange Center on Luna, watching through the vast windows as children of both species played together in the low-gravity gardens. The sight still amazed her even after all this time. "Pack Mother, look!" Jax called out, now 10 years old and significantly taller. He was teaching a group of human children how to navigate the low gravity using Hegemony movement techniques. "Emma can do the spiral jump now." Emma, the human girl who had befriended Jax on that first day on Earth, landed gracefully beside him. At 9 years old, she had become one of the most vocal advocates for interspecies friendship among human children. Sarah smiled and waved, but her attention was drawn to the more serious conversation happening behind her. Commander Vex was meeting with Admiral Rodriguez, the new head of Human Space Command, and their discussion was growing heated. "The Zareth Collective has destroyed 3 more colonies in the Outer Rim," Admiral Rodriguez was saying, her voice tight with worry. "Both human and Hegemony settlements. They're not discriminating between our species." Commander Vex's expression was grim. "Their technology is beyond anything we have encountered. Our combined fleets barely managed to evacuate the Kepler system before they arrived." Sarah turned from the window, her heart sinking. For 2 years, humans and Hegemony had worked together to build peace. They had established joint colonies, shared scientific research, and created cultural exchange programs that were slowly healing the wounds of their 5-year war. But now a new threat had emerged from the galactic core. The Zareth Collective was a hive mind species that viewed all other forms of life as inferior and dangerous. They had already consumed dozens of star systems, converting every living thing into biomass to fuel their expansion. Both humans and hegemony had hoped their own territories were too far away to interest the collective, but that hope had proven false. "How many ships do they have in the latest incursion?" Sarah asked, joining the conversation. "Conservative estimates suggest at least 1,000 capital ships," Admiral Rodriguez replied, "and they're building more with every world they consume." Commander Vex stood and walked to the tactical display showing the current state of the galaxy. Red markers indicated Zareth-controlled systems, and they formed an ominous blob spreading outward from the galactic center. "Our intelligence suggests they will reach the core human and hegemony worlds within 6 months," he said grimly, "unless we find a way to stop them." "What about the other species?" Sarah asked. "The Crystalline Confederacy, the Aquatic Republic, the Silicon Communion. Surely they're all threatened by this expansion." Admiral Rodriguez shook her head. "The Confederacy tried to negotiate with the Zareth. The entire crystalline home system is now a dead zone. The Aquatic Republic has retreated to the deepest ocean worlds they can find. The Silicon Communion. We haven't heard from them in 3 months." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. In just 2 years, the galaxy had gone from a state of expanding peace to facing the possibility of total extinction. "There is one option we haven't discussed," Commander Vex said quietly. "What option?" Admiral Rodriguez asked. Vex gestured to the window where human and hegemony children continued to play together, unaware of the adult conversation. "The Cubs. They are our greatest achievement and perhaps our greatest weapon." Sarah's protective instincts flared immediately. "Absolutely not. I won't put children in danger, not for any reason. Pack Mother, hear me out," Vex said gently. "I am not suggesting we send them into battle. But think about what they represent. 2 years ago, our species were sworn enemies. Now, because of 5 cubs and 1 human who refused to abandon them, we are allies." Admiral Rodriguez was following his reasoning. "You're talking about diplomacy, using them as ambassadors to unite the remaining free species." "Exactly. The galaxy has dozens of species that have never cooperated with each other. They view humans as aggressive expansionists and hegemony as violent predators. But they might listen to children who represent both species working together." Sarah was quiet for several minutes, considering the implications. Through the window, she could see Kess, now 12 and showing the intelligence that would make her a leader among her people. The young female was helping human and hegemony children work together to build an elaborate sculpture in the low-gravity environment. "It's not just about using them as symbols," Sarah said slowly. "These children have actually lived the cooperation we're asking other species to embrace. They understand both cultures better than any adult." Commander Vex nodded. "And they have something no adult diplomat possesses: absolute moral authority. Who could refuse a request for help from children whose homeworlds are threatened with extinction?" Before Admiral Rodriguez could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Sarah's communication device buzzed with an urgent message from Earth Command. "Admiral," the voice crackled through the speaker. "We have a situation. Zareth scouts have been detected in the Sol system. They're conducting reconnaissance of Earth's defenses." The blood drained from Admiral Rodriguez's face. "How many ships?" 3 scout vessels, but Admiral, they're not alone. We're detecting massive gravitic signatures about 12 hours out. The main Zareth fleet is coming." Sarah felt the world tilt around her. The Zareth had accelerated their timeline. Instead of 6 months, they had perhaps days before the assault began. "All species fleet positions?" Commander Vex asked grimly. "Human and hegemony fleets are moving to defensive positions around Earth and the major colonies. But, sir, even combined, we estimate a 30% chance of successful defense." Sarah looked out at the children playing in the garden. In a few hours, she would have to tell them that their peaceful world was about to become a battlefield. She would have to explain that the future they had been building together might end before they reached adulthood. But then she remembered something Kess had said during the peace negotiations 2 years ago. "The strongest thing anyone can do is protect those who cannot protect themselves. We're going to need to evacuate the children," Admiral Rodriguez said, her mind already shifting to tactical planning. "No," Sarah said firmly. "We're going to give them a choice. Both military commanders stared at her. Dr. Chen, we can't ask children to— I'm not asking them to fight, Sarah interrupted. But I think we should ask them if they want to help save their galaxy. These 5 cubs and all the other children in our exchange programs have become something new, the first truly interspecies generation in galactic history. She turned to face Commander Vex and Admiral Rodriguez. What if we don't try to hide them from this crisis? What if we ask them to help us face it, not as weapons or symbols, but as the bridge between species that they've always been? Commander Vex was quiet for a long moment, his golden eyes reflecting deep thought. You are suggesting we trust the future of the galaxy to children. I'm suggesting we trust the future of the galaxy to the only beings who have already proven that cooperation across species lines is possible, Sarah corrected. The adults have had thousands of years to figure out how to work together. We've failed over and over again. But these children, they've succeeded where we never could. Admiral Rodriguez shook her head. The risk is enormous. If we're wrong, if the other species don't listen, then we'll face the Zareth with the same divided, suspicious galaxy that's existed for millennia, Sarah replied. But if we're right, if these children can do what no adult diplomat has ever managed— She looked out at the garden again, where Kes was now teaching human children a traditional hegemony coordination game, while Jax explained human mathematical concepts to young hegemony. They were creating something entirely new, a culture that belonged to both species and transcended the limitations of either. Then we might just save everyone, she finished quietly. Commander Vex moved to stand beside her at the window. The Pack Mother speaks wisdom as always, but this choice cannot be ours alone. If we are to ask the cubs to carry this burden, they must understand what they are accepting. Sarah nodded. Then let's ask them. All of them. And let's trust them to make the right choice. Outside, the children continued to play, unaware that the fate of the galaxy might soon rest in their young hands. But Sarah had learned over 4 years that these children were far stronger and wiser than most adults gave them credit for. If anyone could unite the fractured species of the galaxy in time to face the Zareth threat, it would be the cubs who had already proven that peace was possible. 6 hours later, Sarah stood before an assembly of 43 children from 12 different species gathered in the main conference hall of the Luna Station. The 5 cubs she had saved 4 years ago sat in the front row, their expressions serious but unafraid. Behind them were human children, young hegemony, and representatives from every species in the local galactic region. You all know why we're here, Sarah began, her voice steady despite her racing heart.
The Zareth Collective is approaching our worlds.
In less than 12 hours, they will begin attacking everything we've built together. Kes, now almost 13 and showing the leadership qualities that would make her a future diplomat, raised her hand. Pack Mother, what do the adult leaders plan to do? Fight, Sarah replied honestly. Human and hegemony fleets are positioning for defense, but we're outnumbered 10-1, and the Zareth have technology we don't understand. A young crystalline named Prism, whose species communicated through light patterns, flashed a question in her crystalline language. One of the translation devices rendered it into standard speech. Why are you telling cubs about war? Should we not be evacuated to safety? Sarah looked around the room at these remarkable children who had become friends across species lines that their parents had never crossed. Because you are not just any cubs. You are the first generation in galactic history to grow up truly understanding multiple species. You've learned to communicate not just in different languages but in different ways of thinking. Tor, now 14 and the most technically minded of the original 5, stood up. Are you asking us to be soldiers? No, Commander Vex said, entering the room with Admiral Rodriguez and representatives from 6 other species. We are asking you to do something much harder. We are asking you to save the galaxy through diplomacy. The room buzzed with whispered conversations in dozens of languages. Sarah could see excitement, fear, and determination in the young faces around her. Emma, the human girl who had befriended Jax 4 years ago, spoke up. What exactly are you asking us to do? Admiral Rodriguez activated a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. There are 47 known spacefaring species in our region. Most of them have never cooperated with others. Many are actively hostile to each other. But if we could unite even half of them, we might have enough ships to fight the Zareth, finished Mel, the artistic one of the original 5 cubs. The problem, Commander Vex explained, is that adult diplomats carry too much history. Every species remembers old conflicts, ancient grudges, trade disputes. Adults see other species as competitors or threats. Jax, now 12 and speaking with the wisdom of someone much older, nodded thoughtfully. But we don't have that history. When I look at Prism, I don't see a crystalline who might be an enemy. I see my friend who taught me how to sing in light patterns. A young aquatic named Current Swift rippled agreement from her portable water tank. The adults see threats. We see possibilities. Sarah felt a surge of pride and terror. These children understood the situation better than most adult leaders. But they were still children, and she was asking them to take on a responsibility that could determine whether billions lived or died. There's something else, she said quietly. If you agree to do this, you'll be traveling to potentially dangerous worlds. Some species might see you as enemies or invaders. Others might try to take you hostage to use against your home species. And if we fail, if the Zareth reach our worlds while you're away, she couldn't finish the sentence. The possibility that these children might return to find their home worlds destroyed was too terrible to voice. Kes stood up slowly, her golden eyes reflecting a determination that reminded Sarah of her father. Packmother, may we have a few minutes to discuss this among ourselves? Of course. The adults retreated to an adjoining room, leaving the children to debate among themselves. Through the transparent wall, Sarah could see animated discussions happening in multiple languages and communication methods. Light patterns flashed between crystalline youth. Complex harmonics emerged from the young silicon entities, and the aquatic representatives created elaborate water dances that conveyed their thoughts. After 20 minutes, the children called the adults back. Kes had been elected as their spokesperson. We have decided, she announced, her voice carrying the authority of a natural leader. We will go. All of you? Admiral Rodriguez asked in surprise. All of us, confirmed Tor. We've assigned teams to visit different species based on our individual skills and knowledge. Prism and the other crystalline cubs will contact the Light Weavers. Current Swift will reach out to the Deep Sea Republic. The Silicon Youth will approach the Quantum Collective. Jack stepped forward. Packmother, we know this is dangerous. But we also know something the adults forgot. What's that? Sarah asked. Children have always been the future, the youngest cub said simply. If the Zareth destroy our galaxy, there won't be any future for anyone. So we have to try. Emma nodded agreement. Besides, we have an advantage no adult diplomat has ever had. Which is? We're proof that cooperation works, Mel explained. Look around this room. 4 years ago, most of our species were enemies or strangers. Now we're friends who would risk our lives for each other. Nira, who had grown into a gifted linguist, added, when we tell other species that working together makes everyone stronger, we can point to ourselves as evidence. Commander Vex stepped forward, his massive frame somehow managing to convey both pride and worry. Cubs, you understand that even if you succeed in uniting the species, we may still lose the coming battle? Yes, Kes replied. But Packmother Sarah taught us something important. Sometimes the right choice is not the safe choice. She chose to save us when it would have been safer to leave us behind. Now we choose to try to save everyone, even though it would be safer to hide. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. These children had grown far beyond anything she could have imagined when she first carried 5 frightened cubs through a burning space station. When do we leave? Tor asked practically. Admiral Rodriguez consulted her tactical display. Fast courier ships are being prepared for each team. You'll need to leave within the hour if you're going to reach your target species before the Zareth arrive. The next hour was a whirlwind of preparation. Sarah helped pack diplomatic packages for each team, including cultural gifts, communication devices, and most importantly, recordings of the children's own stories of interspecies cooperation. As the first transport prepared to launch, Sarah gathered the original 5 cubs around her one last time. I want you to know, she said softly, that I have never been more proud of anyone in my entire life. 4 years ago, you were frightened children who just wanted to survive. Now you're young leaders who might save the galaxy. We learned from the best teacher, Kes replied, embracing Sarah with arms that had grown strong and confident. You showed us that love is stronger than fear, and hope is stronger than despair. One by one, the transport ships launched, carrying children toward species that had never trusted outsiders. Sarah watched from the observation deck as the lights of the ships disappeared into hyperspace, heading for encounters that would determine the fate of every living thing in the galaxy. 12 hours later, reports began coming in. The young crystalline had convinced the light weavers to contribute their energy manipulation technology. The aquatic representatives had persuaded 3 water world species to join the alliance. Most surprisingly, the Silicon youth had managed to wake the ancient quantum collective from their meditative isolation. By the time the Zareth fleet arrived in the outer system, they faced not the divided, suspicious collection of species they expected, but a united armada of over 30 different civilizations fighting as one for the first time in galactic history. The battle raged for 3 days across 12 star systems. The Zareth's superior technology was countered by the diverse tactics and combined strengths of species that had learned to trust each other through the example of their children. When the last Zareth ship retreated toward the galactic core, battered and defeated, the Allied fleet found itself transformed. They had not just won a military victory. They had discovered that cooperation made them all stronger than they had ever been alone. Sarah stood once again on the observation deck of the Luna station, watching as ships from 47 different species docked at the new galactic cooperation station that was already under construction. The children were returning as heroes, but more importantly, they were returning to a galaxy that had finally learned to work together. Kess found her there, looking out at the impossible sight of former enemies building something beautiful together. "Pack, Mother, do you think the peace will last this time?" Sarah smiled, putting her arm around the young female who had become like a daughter to her. "I think it has a chance. Real cooperation is like a fire that spreads from one person to another. U5 started that fire 4 years ago. Now it's burning across the entire galaxy. And if it starts to die out?" Sarah looked down at Kess, seeing in her golden eyes the wisdom and compassion that would make her a leader for the new galactic age. "Then we'll do what humans do best. We'll protect it, nurture it, and make sure it keeps burning for generations to come." As if summoned by their conversation, Jax, Tor, Mel, and Nira joined them at tea.